Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Klayim, Pedig Beis, Halacha Ches. We will be learning today Daf Chaf Beis. We left off on Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis in the beginning of the Gemara, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. I would like to share the following, that first of all, when we had on top of the Amid, right, when we had an Halacha Ches, the din of the places in which we have to have a base roiva gap, there was a huge machlokes whether, and there are many options over here, the base roiva that's separating these two areas in the field need only be a square, a base roiva, and both sides, either sides of that box that you're placing in middle of the two species, need not to have a separation at all. Others say you have to have a base roiva by, that means 10.2 by 10.2, and then you get to narrow it down like we had in the Mishnah Daf Tezayin. And even over there's a machlokes when it gets narrowed down. Do you have to always leave some space between the two species? Or again, since the gap is so large, it is a base roiva, thank you very much, Kevan, then perhaps you don't have to have any space at all. And you have other opinions that say that the base roiva, which is 10.2 amis, has to go throughout the entire field, totally separating, let's say, the wheat and the barley throughout with the base roiva measurement. I just want to put it out there. So regarding the shear of a base roiva, there are many different ways of applying that shear. Now, we learned in the Mishnah that when you have to have a base roiva gap, one of the examples the Mishnah gave is if you have a grapevine and it's normal that right surrounding the grapevine, whether it is 3 tvachim or whether it is 6 tvachim, that's an area that's never planted. Says the Mishnah, that area could be counted, is counted towards the base roiva gap, even though anyways you're not planting it because of the din of a keren, as we will begin to unpackage this topic in the Gemara. First, that's also going to lead us to learn some halachos regarding the halachic, the biblical, the rabbinical, the distance that's needed to be measured from a single grapevine. We're not talking about a keren. Whenever we speak about a vineyard, there has to be a much larger gap, space. We're speaking here about a grapevine, so we're going to have some Gemara on that. Then the Gemara is going to go back to analyze the machlokes we had in the Mishnah after we established that tfuah v'tfula beis roiva, yerek b'yerek shisha tvachim. Right? Then we had a machlokes tanaim if it's tfuah b'yerek, yerek b'tfuah. But before we get into that machlokes, even the Chachamim's shita will agree. Guys, remember this word over here, that a row of vegetables, not a square of vegetables, but a row of vegetables near a field of grain, right? Yerek bitfua, if it's a row, not a square, then you only need 6 tvachim of separation and not the beis roiva that we have in the Mishnah. That's going to be a very important yesod that we will need in today's stuff. And finally, we're going to have a very detailed discussion. And here again, having pictures will really facilitate the understanding of the mitzias of our sugya regarding the law that if you are planting in a grain field, vegetables, and as we just said, that lokula alma, if the formation of the vegetables is in a row, all you need from either side, if there are 2 sides, or if there's only one side, 6 tvachim, right? 6 tvachim of width. That 6 tvachim of width will have to go for 10.5 amas of length in both sides.
10.2 or 10.5?
Here it's going to be 10.5.
Oh.
Okay. And we're going to see various configurations of this law. And mamish, we can say on this, gal einai, just a general, perhaps, Hasidic insight into this whole topic is that what are we trying to accomplish over here? We're trying to have diversity that's in close proximity, as close as we can get, without it getting mingled. And I think that's really our whole avodas Hashem, that we're trying to get close to Hashem the right way. The wrong way would be to have an unhealthy mingling. An unhealthy mingling, let's say we can get so close to God, David, that we can lose our own metzias. We can lose our bechira. No. We always have bechira. But on the other hand, we have to get very, very close. I mean, that's really what we're learning about. Okay. Says the Gemara. Let's begin. So again, the first rule that the Mishnah said in Mishnah Ches and Halacha Ches is that when you need to have the share of a Beis Roiva, anything is included in the share, even though you anyways would have left it empty. And the first example the Mishnah gave was around the grapevine. Says the Gemara that you should know that Rabbi Bun Barchia, the Shem Rabbi Ze'eda, Loi Shanu, that what? That we are counting this work area around the grapevine. Like we mentioned, it's either 3 tfachim or 6 tfachim. Loi Shanu Ela Ochla Sagefen. Only the area around the grapevine. But Gefen Atzma, just to clarify what this means, doesn't only mean the vine itself. It means the area directly under the branches. It's not so big. Many people went here to Akedem. The area directly under the branches, that's called the Gefen. Loi is not counted towards the Beis Roiva measure. The question is, why not? Lama. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you why not. The area right beneath the grapevine, if one were to plant there, that and the grapevine will become Klein, Kilei Hakenem. It will become Asur Bahana. What we are looking for throughout, what's the Beis Roiva? What's the 6 Tvachim? We're looking throughout to create enough of a gap where a observer will see it separated. Since the observer knows that the area directly under the Geffen means under the grapevine's branches, not in the earth, under the vine itself. That also, you have to leave deliberately empty for you not to create an Isur Hana'ah. So that does not allow for the observer to see it as part of the Beis Roiva that's needed. Now we got a problem over here. You know what the problem is, David? When we learn about a grapevine, what? Only the area directly underneath it is an area in which you may not plant? Isn't there a larger distance that anyways you need? That's going to be the problem with this. But the Gemara is really limiting what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah seems to be saying that any area that's unplanted is counted towards the Beis Roiva. The Gemara says, no. The work area, which is 3 or 6 tfachim around the grapevine, that is what you can count. That's called the Ochlas Hagefen. Very good. So right away asks the Gemara, if this is to be understood the way we said it, that any area, David, that may not be used cannot be counted towards the Beis Roiva Shir. The Mishnah gave 3 examples, right? The Mishnah gave an example of the Geffen. The Mishnah gave an example of a grave site. Like we said, one is not allowed to plant on a grave site. And the Mishnah gave an example of a boulder that's not a halacha, but it's b'metzias. You cannot plant on a boulder. That they all count. But asks the Gemara, and here the Gemara gives a bomb answer. Answers the Gemara, kever ein isuroi nikar. Now, there are different ways of understanding ein isuroi nikar. Look, let's read inside the Pnei Moshe. The second line from the top of the Amid. Mashane kever ein isuroi nikar kolemer masho oisuroi bahanom v'hu hamesa kavur shamen nikar. Why is one not allowed to plant by a grave? Why? And by a grave, it means not wherever the person is buried under the ground, you cannot plant underneath it. But why is it also? Because there's someone buried underneath the ground. The person is covered up. That's the way the Pnei Moshe understands. Since the hameis, the corpse that's buried is not nikar, it's part of. So even though it's asur, you do count it towards. But over here, since the geffen is nikar, I'm reading inside the Pnei Moshe. So the observer knows, no one is going to plant right underneath the geffen. So since people know it's not being planted anyways because of kilei hakedem, you can't count it towards. Others understand that when the Gemara answers that keved eini surei nikar, the Gemara means to say is that when the Mishnah says that the keved area is counted towards the Beis Reiva, only if it is an unmarked grave. When people don't know, that's not what the Bnei Moshe is saying. That's a different type of. So if no one knows it's a grave, I know. But since the observer, it's about Marasayin. If people don't know, then it counts towards. If people know someone is buried there, and a chanami, it's not counted towards. Okay, either this or that. A weiter Rabam question. If you're telling me that if everyone sees the grapevine and they know that because of Kili Akedem you can't plant it, halachically, and it doesn't count towards, then what's the difference between under the grapevine or the work area around it? Isn't the work area around the grapevine an area that biblically has to be left fallow because of Kili Akedem? That's the Gemara's kasha. In other words, let me tell you, the largest space that people would leave around the grapevine unplanted was 6 tvachim. Okay. And we're speaking about not a vineyard. A vineyard needs much greater of a distance. But around every kedem, you have to have 6 tvachim. And if you plant there, it's aser bahana. This is a bomb question. So answers the Gemara, Ella must be that our Mishnah Taka can only follow the sheet of Rabbi Yishmael. The Rabbi Yishmael holds, in contrast to all the Chachamim, ein avoida legefen yechidis. Wow. In other words, the only area that has to be left unplanted is under the branches. And once you left the area of the branches, we're not speaking about a kedem. This is only one Tana, very lenient. They hold that you are allowed to plant there. And that's the only reason why the Mishnah counts it towards the Beis Reiva. Let me word it differently. In other words, the Gemara is saying that we don't paskin like this. We paskin that you have to have 6 tefachim. So actually, we will not follow the rule of the Mishnah. And a kever, either like the Pnei Moshe says, because you don't see the corpse, or the Mishnah is only speaking about a case where it's unmarked. People don't know about it.
What about the roots? The roots of a grapevine extend.
We're going to learn a few chapters about Kilei Akedem. So I don't want to make a statement now, Kevan, that I might have to correct. But seemingly from our Gemara, so far, very much like by Kilei Zeroyim, there is a lot of Maras Ayin biblically involved in these prohibitions. I know that by Kilei Akedem you have to have biblical larger distances, but still it's about Maras Ayin. It's not that much about nourishment. Okay, even though I'm sure there is some nourishment issues, and therefore let's leave your question.
What's the difference in you're saying in the circle versus under the grapevine?
A very, very big difference.
What's the difference?
Well, let's say,
The grapevine goes.
no, there's a vine is very narrow. They build these trellises. Let's say the area under the grapevine, under the branches, let's say from side to side, let's say in our measurements, let's say it's 2 feet. I don't think it's more than that.
Okay.
A side of the 2 feet, a side of the area directly underneath the branches, around every grapevine, there's a certain 6 tvachim is not that much.
Right.
6 tvachim is like an amma. I mean, saying if amma is 5 tvachim, 6 tvachim, it's from your tip of your finger, there's an area that's left empty. And actually, it's called avodas hakedem achila. It eats it up. It eats it up because people that want to walk around it, you have to leave it empty. One around.
So the one around is more than what you're saying. That's under.
Yes. So our Gemara is saying that the area underneath it is not counted towards the Beis Reiva. The Mishnah only meant the area around it because our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yishmael that you are allowed to plant. People don't plant, David, not because you're not allowed to, because you want to be able to work the grapevine. You want to be able to harvest the grapevine. And don't forget, if you were to plant stuff there, you'll have to trample on it. That's not practical, but there's no halachic issue. Okay, like now the Mishnah said that was the big rule. Tvua b'tvua, a Beis Reiva. What was the Mishnah Machadish? That if you have Yerek b'Yerek, it's Gavaldik. If you have Yerek b'Yerek, my friends, all you need to have is 6 tvachim. All you need to have is 6 tvachim. And then the question is, okay, what happens if one area is tvua, the other area is Yerek? Are you machmir? Do you go by the base tvua, base roiva, or do you go by the 6 tvachim? That was the machloikas. The chachamim hold l'chumra. You need a base roiva. tvua b'yerek, yerek b'tvua beis Rebbe. Rabbi Eliezer holds that no, the only time where you have to have beis Rebbe is tvua b'tvua. If it's tvua and yerek or yerek b'tvua, all you need to have is 6 tvachim. Rabbi Eliezer is normally machmer. Here he's make. That's the mission. Says the Holy Gemara. Tvua b'tvua beis Rebbe. Okay.
Does it matter that Rabbi Eliezer doesn't mention the other way around?
No, because it's superfluous. It's self-understood though. But before we go into this machlokes, it sounds when you read the Mishnah that when you have a base tfuah, as long as you leave a base raiva, when you have a state tfuah, you leave a base raiva, you can plant different species. Remember we mentioned the world of chavush? Says the Gemara, there's something that even with the base raiva you won't be allowed to do. And that is, do not close one species from all the 4 sides. Now, let me say like this. We already spoke about this din before. I wish the Gabbai was here. We're going to speak 2 dinim here. One we mentioned many times, and one we chapped on our own only once. And what the Gemara here is saying, the Gemara really means to tell you 2 halachas. One we already quoted Rav, which is simple. That if I have, let's say I have wheat, even though I have a big area, okay, and I planted wheat in the middle, and I'm going to leave a base raiva from all the sides. I can't surround it with barley. There's a base raiva. This picture is not a good picture. You don't need this picture. Because because that's called kalayim. A base raiva helps if it's only parallel or 2 sides. That's fine. So I have wheat here, and I want to put barley in the middle. That's fine. But the moment I'm surrounding it, I can't do that. There's another din implied. What's the other din implied? Let me say it by heart, and then we'll read in the Rashi. That if I have just wheat and barley, good wheat here, base raiva barley, but around the whole area I put a fence. That mingles everything up. The fence makes everything to be in one area. Let's read inside that Ashidali. It's on the right column, 3 lines from the bottom. So the simple words, it's Shaloi Tehe Chavusha Ma'ar Baruch Haisel Da'af al Gab Da'hai Soda Shecholkoi Min Ho'achad Lezrei Min Achad Hava Bei Beis Reva. You're leaving the Beis Reva space. Right, the end. Why do we use the word chayvish? Chayvish means in jail. That's he's bound, stuck. Now, v'gam, the top line in the left column, that what this also implies, v'gam tzarech shelo yihiyu elu shnei haminim ukafim geder ma'arba ruchais ka'adam hachavush v'beis hasoyer. So if you have an area that's only fenced from 3 sides, that will be okay. Look inside the picture. You have a chitim, right? Stay a chitim. And one we already mentioned that if it's a base raiva, really, if it's bigger, even if it's a base raiva, if it's a square, that's what we learned by tvua. You have to have a base raiva space in between. All right, the picture was not drawn so beautifully because he wrote Beis Raiva in the box of Chitim. If that's the space of a Beis Raiva, there needed to be a greater distance between these 2 boxes. That's not Meduik, it doesn't matter. Point is that you planted Chitim, you planted Soidim, you gave the Beis Raiva, and if you want a fence in the area, good, but don't do it from all 4 sides. This is the Ikir, what the Gemara wants to say over here. Because then it would be like putting barley in the middle, putting Chitim all the way around it, even though you have a Beis Raiva space from any area of the middle to the outer. Doesn't matter. A fence will have the same effect. Now the Gemara is different, going to make a comment. So now Zak the Gemara statement. I know we had this already from the beginning of Brachas in the Yerushalmi. Not always does it mean a question. Here it's a statement. He said in front of Rabbi Aser, Oy bazoi, kinan amran. I'll tell you the following. That Hadab Bika Simoiniya. Bika Simoiniya was a valley. We can say over here, some patches of land in Yosemite. What happens? There are certain areas that are surrounded by very steep mountains. An area, a valley that's surrounded by very steep mountains. The mountains create this gedek. So in that valley that they were familiar with, it won't help for you to make a base roiva space. You can make 10 base roivas. No, I don't want to go with 10 base roiva spaces. You have to be careful. But you can't make a base roiva space. I was just hesitating because maybe there's a shear somewhere where you could. Okay. Gavaldik.
These are only mechitzas for kilayim.
These are mechitzas for kalayim. Ramachol is saying very good. We're not talking about Shabbos. We're not talking about Eruvin. Very good. 100%. Even though they're just to know, just to understand, we are Eruvin. By Eruvin also, you don't need to have kavana. That for sure. By Eruvin, the mechitzas that I made, that means I know, for example, all these telephone poles. The problem with them is that the wire is not on top, and therefore it's garnished. But if there would be poles, mechitzas, that halachically would serve at the Suras HaPesach for Eruvin, even though they were built for L'choil, Lagamre, they are used. Not they could be used. We use them. So and there's this kind of concept is the same. In other words, it's not because the gedder was put the kavana to enclose. That's his point. If there is a gedder, now is that gedder considered a gedder for Rishus HaYachid? I don't know. There could be gaps of 10 amas. I don't think that it's so. I don't think that the criteria for Hilchas Shabbos is the criteria over here.
Rabbi, question?
Yes.
Right, the fence is enclosing it, and that's a marat ayin, correct?
That takes away the advantage of the gap. That means when a person looks at it, they see one field. And in one field, you can't have two types. Very good. That's the way I would word it.
Are you allowed to post signs, large signs, and instead of creating all these gaps to let people know this side is...
B'chlal by Marasayin, I want you to know, Kevan. Generally, I'm afraid to say over here, signs are very helpful. So when a person makes a shtar mechiras Shabbos in their store, halach a proper shtar, which is because they have a goyish partner and they put up a big sign in the window that this is under new ownership, that will be helpful. When you go when it used to be, right, the whole tshuva that with the almond milk, right, that Ramah. Right. Today, I don't think you need the signs, but when everyone had cow's milk, and very few people would put almond milk at a chasana, a shleishik chasana, and putting up a sign makes a big difference, right? That's the whole din. Leave it in the container for people to see that it's almond milk, for there not to be a sign that you have a cholov, real cholov after basa. Okay. I don't know if you can apply it over here, but generally you're right. Marasai could be addressed sometimes. Okay, weiter. So now that we have this machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Tanakama and the Chachamim, and Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says that not only vegetables to vegetables suffices a smaller share of 6 tfachim, but even if one part is tvua and the other part is vegetables, you also could you get away with the minimum 6 tvachim. So I want you to know right now that I say right now, David, this is the Nakud, it's just technical. The whole thing is if the vegetables is in a square patch. If the vegetables is in a rectangular, it's going to be more lenient according to more people. And let's read it inside. Masiv Rabbi Eliezer l'Rabbanan. The word masiv normally means akasha. Says the Maraful, the 6 lines from the bottom, masiv means lashon tshuva. Rabbi Eliezer is explaining his opinion. Yeah, it's akasha. It's not akasha, that's akasha. He's making the following point to the Chachamim. Kema de is lechoin. Just like you yourselves, Chachamim, are moida. Like we just mentioned. That when do the Chachamim say, David, that Yarak B'tfuah, Beis Roiva, if the Yarak is planted in a square, and we're already a few days into this, that a square sometimes will demand a larger share. Actually, sometimes a square, right, karachas is even better. But a row of vegetables near a state tfuah, lukula alma, you only need to have 6 tfuah. So just like you're moida, right? Kal, you're more lenient when you have a shura, and you're more chaymer, you're machmer by a meruba. Hachinami isli kal b'meruba. In other words, since squareness, generally a square brings a greater chumrah than a row. I'll give you one example that we spoke out in the words of intro yesterday or 2 days ago. It's important that you have to have a base roiva when you have a sada by tfuah. What happens if you don't have a base roiva? If you don't have a sada, how much space do you need to have by grain? The answer is it depends on the formation. If it's square, you also need to have a base roiva. Even if it's only 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim. By the meishar, you only need to have the 2 amas. In other words, generally, square demands a greater separation.
Are we saying a square create?
But you, chachamim amoida, that in the Mishnah, l'kul amal, yerek b'yerek, 6 tvachim, even if it's a square. In other words, normally squareness brings about a greater chumrah.
What's the svara?
The svara.
Why the long one is more making?
It looks less mingled.
Oh.
It's all about appearances.
Oh.
Okay. So let me just finish reading.
Apologize.
Since by you, chachamim yourselves, amoided, that squareness imposes no stringency. And you, chachamim amoided, listen to my words, gavaldic words, it's a gavaldic logic. And you, the chachamim amoided, that will be, what I'm saying now is the basis for everything else. That if the vegetables are planted in a row, even the chachamim amoided, between a row of vegetables and grain, you only need to have 6 tvachim. You don't need to have base roiva. Squareness by vegetables doesn't bring about a chumrah. Yerek b'yerek square, 6 tvachim. So why would it be different over here? That's beautiful. What's meila by tfuah? I get it. By tfuah, if you have a field, then you always have to have a base roiva, tfuah b'tfuah. If you have an area that's less than a field, what's less than a field? The base roiva is a drop less than a field. From 6 tvachim until the base roiva, including a base roiva, tfuah b'tfuah, how much space do you need to have? It depends. Square, base roiva. Meishar, only 2 amas. By Yonach, we don't say that. So since you're moida yourselves, that by vegetables, between vegetables and vegetables, squareness doesn't bring a chumrah, and you are moida that if there is a row of vegetables in a grain field, guys, even the chachamim are moida. It says in the Mishnah Yarek bitfuah tfuah b'yarek. It says in our Mishnah Beis Roiva, no, that's only if it's a box. But why? Why would the squareness of a vegetables bring about a chumrah when squareness doesn't bring about a chumrah by vegetables? Now hold on. Who told you that the Chachamim hold? Who told you that? Maybe the Chachamim hold, like it says in the Mishnah, that you know where 6 tvachim is enough. Yerek b'yerek. The Chachamim said the words in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't speak about a meruba. The Mishnah doesn't speak about a mesha. The Mishnah just says Yarek b'tfuah, tfuah b'yarek. The Chachamim, the Tanakama says beis roiva. So he says no. Rabbi Eliezer will show you that the Chachamim are moida that even by vegetables near a grain, they'll be lenient if the vegetables is in a row. Therefore, he says, "Oy bazoi, why should a square be there?" The heicha nashkachan the is lerabanan kal b'shura v'chayim b'meruba. Guys, we don't have to bring up arayat chayim b'meruba. We don't have to bring that proof because our Mishnah said it. The Mishnah said that chachamim hold right yarek b'tfuah tfuah b'yarek beis roiva. That's a chumrah. But no, it's where do I know that everyone will be moided that if it's a shura, even though it's vegetables and grain, it's a beis roiva. Vegetables and grain, if the vegetables is planted in a shura, you only need to have 6 tvachim. From the following brayz. If you want to put a shura of yarek inside state tvua, so all you need to have, I keep on mentioning 6 tvachim. There's another nuance. There has to have a minimum length. There has to be a minimum, and the minimum length is, like I said, Kevin, in the introduction, 10.5 amas. 10.5 amas is a bit more than the base roiva, right? That's why base roiva is 10 by 0.2 times 10 by 2. 10.5, you're not squaring it. 6 tvachim by 10.5. That's a braisa. And all you need for the width, al roichav shisha, and shisha means not shisha means 6 tvachim. Okay. So anyways, the Chachamim don't have to respond to Rabbi Eliezer, but Rabbi Eliezer, had a good point. Squareness generally does not impose a chumrah on vegetables. So why are you imposing it over here? Okay, but now what did we just say right now? What becomes clear, box of vegetables, lachachamim, box square, base roiva. Row, 6 tvachim. Says the Gemara, turning to that, chav beis amid beis. Now it's going to get real fun. And here we have to have pictures. Amar Rabbi Yechanan asks, and it says Rabbi Yechanan, that yes, I get it. That if you have that space, you're good. You can only plant one species of vegetables. Why is that? Why is that? I want to tell you like this. If you don't have a grain field, if you do not have a grain field, you have one row of vegetables. We never learned about this case yet. How many types can you plant in that row? As many as
you want.
As long as, see, we don't say roish toiv. As long as you leave 1.5 tefach space in the row, in the length between one and the other. I know we did not learn this inside yet, but that's the rule. So if I have a row of vegetables, I have a row 4 vegetables, 6 tvachim wide. I don't care if it's 10.5 amas or if it's as long as the goes. It's long. Plant, stop, leave a tefach and a half, plant something else. Leave a tefach and a half, plant something else. Says Rabbi Yechanan that since you're planting vegetables inside a grain field, even though you're leaving, like we said, the 6 wide, the 10.5, you're leaving that gap, but that only allows for you to plant one type inside. Why? I'll tell you why. Because what are we looking for? We're looking for the observer's eyes that are looking at this field. They have to see the vegetables as something distinct. These will be the words the whole time. When you have one, everything is one, makes it more chashuv. Makes it more chashuv. When you break it up, every part by itself is less chashuv. It's less. If it's less chashuv, then it's less distinct. If it's less distinct, it looks more mixed. Okay, so that's rule number 1. Now, hold on. Now we're going to limit Rabbi Yechanan's ruling. And for that, you have to look at the picture in the bottom left. Now look at this case over here.
Number 2.
Yeah, look how gavaldic this is. This is so beautiful. So again, guys, we have a grain field, and inside the grain field, you're planting a row of vegetables. And right, the row of vegetables, you're leaving the correct size of space in between. You got that. We were speaking about the row of 6 tvachim and 10.5 amas. Now, what happens if you make a row that's not 6 tvachim wide, that's 7 tvachim wide? And
we're about to learn this?
Right now, we didn't learn it yet.
Okay.
I want to say something else. What I mentioned before, when you have a row, another way that you would be able to make a separation otherwise, if I have a row of 6 tvachim, if not in the grain field, same thing, just in another direction, is that you plant on one side of the row one type of vegetables, 6 tvachim. You leave 1.5 tefach gap in the middle, and then you plant another parallel that will also be permitted. Here again, Rabbi Yechanan says, not over here. Because when you have the fact that it's a vegetable roll, the toich state tfuah, you need for it to be a davar chashuv, for it to be distinct, only one type in it. So now, Rabbi Zera says, let me tell you something. What happens if you have a row that's not 6 tvachim? You have a row that's 7 tvachim. And you're planting on each side of the row a different type of vegetables. Now listen, let me just finish up the logic over here. Why are we saying 7 tvachim? Because if every row has 1 tefach, it and the unplanted area in the middle together is how much? 6. The other side and the unplanted in the area is 6. Everyone will be moida that you can plant 2 rows of 6 tvachim in the middle of a tfuah, as long as you have between the edges and the grain and the other edges and the grain, the 6 tvachim, Rabbi Yechanan never said you can't plant more than one row of 6 tefachim. He says that in that row of 6 tefachim, you can only plant one vegetable. So if you want to plant 2 types, don't think you have to have 2 rows of 6 tefachim. Rabbi Yechanan is saying, I'm giving you a good eitzah. You make one row that is a little bit bigger. Only plant, if you need 2 types, only plant, like look at the picture, to the left, one species, to the right, another species. And you can view each one tefach periphery row as a 6 tefach row. How is it 6 tefach? That one, and use the unplanted area in the middle to be mitzvah to it to make the 6 tefachim. The other one is planted outside the 6 tefachim. How beautiful! Even though each one is using the middle to make up its 6 tefachim.
So that's one plantable area, 1 tefach.
In the case of 7 tefachim, in the case where you would have a wider, the point is that you can overlap the 2 things. Number one, the unplanted area can go on both sides. That's the word. It's mitzvah to both sides. Let's read it inside. That if the row in middle, the vegetable row in middle, isn't comprised of 6 tefachim of width, which is what we were speaking about until now, in which Rabbi Yechanan says only one type in there. What happens that if it's more than 6, 7, shuzarei tefach mikan, betefach mikan, and the chiddush is that oison chamishon nidoinim lekan ulekan. All right.
From the strip to the left, the strip to the right, where it says Greenfield, you also need 6 tefach.
That's another thing that we already established. Even lechachamim, David, I'm going back now. That said, ben yarik l'tzvui, you need to have a base roiva. If the vegetables is in a strip, not in a box, they also might the 6 tefach. So that we already established, which is amazing. Okay. Now, according to Rab Ze'era, if you planted 1 tefach in a row of vegetables, that's good enough. Another chiddush. Why would it not be good enough? Again, because it's very narrow. It might not look distinct. Problem is that we have a student. Now we're going to have a bomb question. Now let's check the Gemara. Then ma did Rab Ze'era. Based on Rab Ze'era's application and understanding of Rabbi Yechanan's position, now you should know that Masiv al the Rabbi Yechanan Taman, that in Bavel, they brought about the following contradiction. If Rabbi Ze'era's understanding of Rabbi Yechanan is correct, I have a stira between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Yechanan. And what is that contradiction? So before we get to Rabbi Yechanan, let's learn a halacha. Halacha is not a chatzi shura v'amad loing. If a person planted a half a row of vegetables in a grain field and stopped, in other words, what did he do? Look inside the picture. You have to have a picture. So again, you have a grain field. There's grain on either sides. You left the right shear between the grain and the vegetables. All right. You planted a row of 6 tefachim, which is good. You packed it up. All right. I'm going from left to right. You filled up a 6 tefach. And then you want to plant another 6 tefach row. But what you did is that you left from the right 6 tefach row, you left the middle of it, the left side of it, 3 tefachim of it unplanted, and then the final 3 tefachim you left planted. Now, what did we just learn right now? We learned right now that even though Rabbi Yechanan says that you have to fill up the 6 tefachim row with the min vegetables, we learned that an unplanted area, you can put another type. But the unplanted can combine with the planted. The case we gave is that the planted is only 1 tefach. Rabbi Ze'era's application. Here it's much better. It's more chashuv. Here in the right 6 tefach row, 3 planted, 3 unplanted. That's the case. Ubikesh lahasl shura cheres. Rab Chizda Amar Asur. In other words, Rabbi Chizda is the most machmir. Rabbi Chizda says that when you are planting a 6 tefach row of vegetables in a grain field, you know when you are allowed to do it. Yeah, because you left a 6 tefachim a gap. You know when you're allowed to do it? When you fill it up in its entirety. It has to be completely full. All right? Only then is it chashuv, which is the way we would understand Rabbi Yochanan. You have to pack it up one type. Don't. Now, don't forget, Rabbi Yochanan says don't put another type. Rabbi Chisda is saying befedish, berachol b'tchaktana. No, don't leave it empty. In other words, you cannot put in the picture, all the way to the right, you cannot put the 3 tvachim of another type of et. You can't do that. You have a 6 tefach. It's not 6 tefach. Okay. That's Rabbi Chisda. So what do you need to do? We tell the farmer either akoiras ashura. Listen, the one that you planted at the 3 tefach is illegal. Now you can fix it. Either uproot it or fill in the unplanted area. Then you're good. Okay. So the case over here would be, let's just say it's the same type. I'm just giving you an example. So you don't have a problem because there's a problem. You can't plant vegetables and they're vegetables. Everything over here is cabbage. So the 6 tefach is cabbage. The other one is, the 3 is cabbage. You're only allowed to plant, it's mafsik. It's not good. That edge, all the way to the right, is close to the grain to the right of it. You can't do that. You have to have 6 tefach. Either uproot it or fill in it. Now, hold on. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, I want you to know that Ispalgan Abchia Bar Bob, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yitzchak, Chad Amar. One says, I disagree with you, Rabbi Chisda. Afilu shloisha l'toich shisha. Look inside. Gavaldik. The picture all the way in the bottom. He says the planted and the unplanted sections combined. The planted and unplanted, we don't need a picture for that. I disagree with Rabbi Chisda. All right, as long as 3 of the 6 were planted, which is the case that we had. The 3 unplanted combined with the 3 planted. And then you have a Charno Amar, even more lenient. No, Rabbi Yehuda argues with Rabbi Chisda, but he only argues with him because 3 of the 6 were planted. So it's something chashuv. Combines with the other 3. Charno Amar, afilu echad mikan v'echad mikan v'echad be'emtza. Look inside the picture all the way in the bottom. He also holds you have to have a total of 1 tefach. You have to have a total of 3 tvachim. He also holds 3 tvachim is half of 6. Correct? Correct. But you don't need to have them all together. So how you would do it? All the way to the left is 1 tefach. Gap, just to make it work, the gap has to be a tefach and a half because it's 3 and 3. In other words, not only do I argue with you, Rabbi Chisda, who holds all 6 have to be packed, not only do I agree with Rabbi Yehuda, you can have 3 planted and you can connect and you can be mitzvah of the 3 that's unplanted. I'll tell you better. The 3 that's planted doesn't have to be congruent, doesn't have to be mitzvah. Like you see in the picture. Planted, unplanted, planted, unplanted, planted.
Where's the 6 tvachim?
You have a total 6 tvachim, David. The planted is 1 tefach, so 3 out of it is 3. And the 2 gaps in between, right, in between 3, there's 2 gaps. Each one is a tefach and a half.
Yeah, look, but between, you have 3 separate types of plantings?
In my case, it can even be that because I just mentioned that you can have a tefach and a half. That's not the point. It can be the same type. We're not reviewing at all. Let's say just same cabbage. The issue is not the vegetables and the vegetables. The issue is how can you plant in a state full of vegetables? You have to leave a separation. The case is that the row of the vegetables only has from either side a separation of 6 tvach. What did we learn in the Mishnah Halkot? That Kanekama says Yarek B'Tfua is Beis Roiva. What did we learn today? You know when the Chachamim say Yarek B'Tfua Beis Roiva, if the vegetables are in a square, we'll go through the same. If it's in a row, everyone is minus 6 tvach. So we have the 6 tvach. But now came along Rabbi Yechanan to get the whole hemshech. He says, well, 1 second. Very nice. You know when we look at the 6 tvachim, you know what? The vegetable row that's separated from either side. If the vegetable row is 6 tvachim, it's 10.5 amas, and Rabbi Yechanan says you can only plant 1 type of vegetables. Okay. Right. Came along Rabbi Zajac and he says, he didn't mean that. You got the case of 7. So now we have this machlokes. Now hold on. Says the Gemara, "V'lo yodin man omar do, man omar do." We don't know who said what. Chad Omar v'chad no Omar. And look, we have to go quickly. Daf Chav Gimel. I know it's late. Min ma do Omar Rabbi Yosi Rab Chia b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. Here's the issue. So they decided in Babel that I'll know who says what. In other words, that the heter of 3 out of 6 only applies if there's no unplanted areas between the 3 tvachim. From there they understood that in other words, according to what their discussion and their determination, as who said what, it comes out that Rabbi Yechanan holds not one is enough. Rabbi Yechanan is the one that holds that what? That you have, that from the 6 tvachim, you know how much you have to have minimally planted? 3. Rabbi Yechanan disagrees with the picture all the way in the bottom. So that's a problem with Rab Ze'eda. Why? Because Rab Ze'eda is saying that if it's 7 tvachim wide, 1 planted is enough to combine with the 5 in the middle, but 1 is never enough. I get we can combine it, but what do you have? You have, if you forget about the 7th, you have 1 planted, and how many unplanted? 5. They determined in Babel that Rabbi Yechanan holds, you're right, you don't have to pack in the whole 6, not like Rabbi Chizda, but you have to have half. So it doesn't fit, so that doesn't work. No, it's Rabbi Ze'eda's understanding of Rabbi Yechanan and the way they understood him in Babel doesn't go hand in hand. Gan Eden. Let's go down.